Good day to all the members of the Buying Legal Counsel joining us for today's panel discussion on cost management. On behalf of the panel, I'd like to thank the Buying Legal team and especially Sylvia for bringing together such a talented and knowledgeable panel for today's roundtable. We'll start today's session by allowing the panel to give a brief introduction of themselves and their experience in the legal operations spend management space. Again, my name's Mark Havengay, and I'm the Senior Managing Director of Legal Transformation Services at Epic Global, and I am proud to be moderating today. So with that, let's start with the panel introductions with Akshay Verma from Facebook. Akshay, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Good morning, and thanks again for having us all. Excited for the conversation today. My background, I was a lawyer for a long time. I've been in the legal industry for about 20 years, all of it here in the Bay Area. And for the last 8 years or so have been in a very different role in business development, legal operations, and legal consulting. I'm currently the head of legal operations at Facebook, and I'm coming up on about 2 years there.
Excellent. Thank you, Akshay. Michael, would you like to go next?
Sure. I'm Michael Reiner. I'm the president of the BTI Consulting Group. We're based just outside of Boston and Wellesley, Massachusetts. And for the last 20 years, we have been conducting a large independent survey of corporate counsel and legal operations folks to find out how they manage their operations, what they think of their law firms, how they're getting value, how could they improve. And then we use that to provide a lot of data back to the legal departments as well as to the law firms to help both improve their performance and hopefully come together a little bit better. We're just about to release our 20th survey and will reflect all the pandemic activity. So that should be very interesting, and we're eagerly awaiting that.
Terrific. Thank you, Michael. Olaf, would you like to give your introduction?
Sure. Thank you. And good morning, afternoon. My name is Olaf van der Linden. I'm Dutch, top expert in procurement supply chain with a biochemistry background, working in my own company, the Allotrope GmbH, and that's in Germany, but working on a global level, delivering the total cost reductions, efficiency solutions, and change, but also passionately helping managers, procurement, supply chain leaders in pharma, chemical, and medical industry at the global, regional, and local level, but also answering the questions via my Allotrope GmbH YouTube channel, and that's really nice. In more than 20 years of international work experience with many years of merger and acquisitions, restructuring, and change programs, I've worked with all different types and levels of people, manufacturing, research, management, up to board level, in many different international cultural and political environments. This combination of background in biochemistry, experience as an international procurement professional, and track record and several programs implementations with change management creates a unique toolkit, famous word, for helping companies all over the world and really enjoying my role and sharing my knowledge and helping organizations to improve. Thank you.
Thank you, Olaf. And then last but not least, Stephanie Corey, would you like to give your introduction?
Sure. Thanks, Mark. Hi, everyone. I'm glad to be here with these great panelists. And my name is Steph Corey. I've been in the legal operations space for my whole adult career. I was a chief of staff and head of legal operations at HP for over a decade, and then briefly at VMware, and then Flextronics most recently as my in-house roles. And then 4 years ago, left the in-house role to start Uplevel Operations, Uplevel Ops, which is a legal operations consulting company. And I run that with my former general counsel and good friend, John Hoke, right now. So we go around helping all kinds of companies build the infrastructure, assess what's going on with their people, process, technology, and help them build out their legal operations programs.
Perfect. Thank you, Stephanie. So let's jump straight into the questions for the day. Our first question for the panel is, as everybody on the call can attest, 2020 has been a wild and crazy year so far, and it proves to be full of challenges and unknowns as we head into the final months. So my first question for the panel today is, how have the legal department's initiatives changed since January pre-COVID in general? And then specifically, what has the impact been on the corporation's legal initiatives? And so, Akshay, let's start with you and get your view from the corporate legal department's perspective.
Yeah, it is quite the crazy year. It's exciting and terrifying to see what kind of news cycle we're going to wake up to every morning. And we certainly woke up to something today. For us, we, for the last 2 to 3 years, have faced some pretty existential threats as a company, going back to Cambridge and obviously very recently the FTC investigation. I'm sure everyone saw the House Democrat report that came out this morning on essentially saying that big tech is all a monopoly and needs to be broken up. So, for us, we've kind of been in crisis mode for a while. And that intensified certainly in March with COVID, with the work from home. The thing that didn't stop was the work that we needed to do, and certainly leveraging our external partners, whether they were law firms or other third parties, to deliver much of that work. So one of the big priorities for my team was to understand, what else we could do on the cost management side. We certainly had, from the top at the company, a cost-cutting exercise, at least through the rest of 2020 in terms of operation costs. That certainly affected legal to a great extent. So there were all those kinds of things. My team had been instituting some cost management priorities for the last 2 years. So we had a little bit of a ramp up that we had already been engaging in that helped us. I think in terms of initiatives, kind of in the smack middle of COVID, we also did a huge reorg for legal. And so that really changed up roles, responsibilities, and it gave us an opportunity to kind of take a better look at our external providers and see where else we could gain some efficiencies.
Excellent. Thank you, Akshay. Stephanie, what 2020 COVID impacts have you seen in the legal operations initiatives and priorities of your clients?
Sure. And I was on a call prior to this, so Akshay, I didn't see any of the news this morning. So now I had to just do a quick Google search to see, dear God, what did I miss just this morning from 11 p.m. last night? But anyway, yeah, it's crazy times. And I think one of the interesting things is, as soon as this hit, and the country started to shut down, the world started to shut down, I thought, here goes all of our work. Everything we're going to be doing from now through December is going to be renegotiate rates with outside counsel, ask for more discounts. How can we save money on outside counsel? And I was pleasantly surprised to find that we definitely saw that when I was in-house, through other downturns over the years. That was one of the immediate things we did, right? Just batten down the hatches and tighten up the outside spend. And I have to say, I've been really pleasantly surprised that has been a small fraction of the work we've been doing. And the majority of work now that GCs are focusing on is around org design and org structure, meaning, do I have the right people doing the right things? And so the vast majority of work that we've been asked to do is to take a look at what work is being done internally, what work is being outsourced to law firms, what work can we outsource to, alternative service providers if we're not already doing that, what work can we unbundle from the firms, et cetera, to save money there. And then, especially focusing on the internal piece of how is work getting done, who's doing what, how do I track that, how do I get data and metrics around that, and do we have the right mix of all of those things? And is there a way to stop work altogether? Is there a way to, get self-help programs up for our clients, put thresholds on things and stuff that legal, should be looking at or should not be looking at, more importantly. And of course, automation. And so to me, that's of course the more fun work, the more interesting work. And I'm really glad to see that most GCs have not had this knee-jerk reaction. Let's just, tighten up the spend as much as we can. Let's look at the bigger picture, because that in the long run is what's going to really, instead of just, slapping a coat of paint on your house, you're really, building that foundation and doing it the right way. So long term, I think it's going to play well for these GCs. So I was very excited to see that.
Excellent. Thank you, Stephanie. As one of the largest ALSPs, we're definitely the beneficiary of of the increased use of alternative legal services providers, and can confirm what you're saying about the broader view of how are we going to get the right people to do the right function at the right price, of course. Michael, what about you? What's your view on how things have changed post-COVID?
Well, I think I've observed what's gone on from two perspectives. The first is almost like Steph had mentioned. I've been doing these surveys a very long time, and we were planning to start a survey literally as this whole thing was breaking out, and I kind of brought our staff together and I said, okay, be prepared. This could be really, really ugly, slash burn. And kind of like Stephen indicated, we were all quite pleasantly surprised that we didn't hear a lot of that. We heard in the beginning, I would say, like from March, the second week in March to about April 15th, we heard, well, we're not cutting, but we're putting things on hold. We're not doing a lot, and I'm not sure we can because we got to figure out how to get our workforce home and what that means. So somewhere around late April, things started rolling again, if you will. We found corporate counsel trying to assess, okay, where are we at? What's happened since everybody went home? What do we do? And how do we deal with the clogged courts? And they seem to, at this point, I would say for the last 2 or 3 months, it's our opinion that the best words I can use is, it appears the shock is over. It's like, okay, we're all got it. We're all going to be working from home. I think every day that passes, we're hearing more about, for the first time last week, we heard people talking about 2022 and 2023, as opposed to talking about it in terms of weeks and months. Now it's years, and until, quote, everybody comes back. So we're seeing, I think this, kind of dovetails with what you were saying, Steph, which is most companies they're going ahead with their spending. They haven't cut their budgets. Many of the budgets are the same. There's about, I think 15% said they were going to cut, 85% said they were going to keep it the same or actually increase a little bit. So we see a lot of attempts and a lot of strategies to settle all the new matters. And right now, a lot of energy going into, how am I going to get there? Our research is saying that corporate counsel expect caseloads to go up by at least, 27%. And right now, their budgets are scheduled to go up about, 1 or 2%. So that math is going to have a real challenge on them. And their answer is, yeah, sure, you can get a lot out of efficiency, but right now there's a tremendous amount of focus on settlements. How do we settle these things? Because what we keep hearing, and I've heard for a number of years, is the great thing about settlements is they eliminate risk and they eliminate spending. So it's like a double benefit. And that's where the big emphasis is right now. But I would have to say, we here at BTI are as happy as Steph, and that most of the industries are continuing to at least push ahead at the levels that they were at. And the troubled industries are spending on restructuring and bankruptcy. So there's a lot of money flowing around right now.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Michael. Olaf, as the panelist really representing the European and international viewpoint, are you seeing the same impacts as our U.S. panelist, or are the European companies experiencing something different in 2020?
Thank you, Mark. Quite interesting and challenging question, I need to say, and not so easy to answer, but let me try to do this. But first, let me explain why it's not so easy. Do we know exactly these European companies, and is there a general one type of European company? That's just the main question. Why is it so important? Depending on the type of company and its maturity level, you need different approaches. or my other used word already at the beginning, toolkit, to explain. And keep it also in mind my often used remark, there's no one size fits all. This is also explained in some of my YouTube videos. Another reason for the need of knowing the type of company is that many categories, there's an advantage in the US region compared to Europe, because the US region is higher on the maturity level in general and procurement. And even within Europe, you see differences in the maturity levels and the acceptance of the procurement organizations. For example, when you compare the UK and the Netherlands with the DACH, Germany, Austria, Switzerland region. It's also important to distinguish the different levels of burning platforms or sense of urgency in the different types of industries, especially during this COVID-19 period. The burning platforms urgency levels I see are, first, the companies with cash flow problems, crisis management needed, I will call it the survival mode. Then you have companies, no impact at all, no changes, the business as usual mode. And, it maybe sounds strange, there are companies having a huge benefit from the crisis and they have worries about how to manage the growth. I will call this all hands on deck mode. And sometimes these kind of companies looks like a successfully startup company. So the type of burning platforms in companies in the US compared to Europe, and in Europe at the different, looking at the different countries next to the Brexit challenge, of course, will be equal for my feeling. The difference will be in which level of burning platform this company is and the linked maturity level, culture, and the attitude if this company is successfully responding to the crisis, if applicable, depending on the type of burning platforms, of course.
Moving on to our second question. We touched on legal spend management as part of our initial question, but the next question will be how have corporate spend strategies changed in the current 2020 COVID environment? And how do we see the next 12 to 24 months impacting the corporate's legal spend strategies? Olaf, let's, since we ended with you last, let's start with you on this question and just have you expand on your thoughts on the legal spend management side over the next 12 to 24 months.
Few last advices to keep in mind when starting your journey trying to get better in this area. Each company is different in size, complexity, and culture. There's no one size fits all, again, mentioned before. Be patient, lobby outside your own department function, find the right group team of people supporting your ideas. I will call it your business friends also. Agree on the approach and the linked selling, branding, and communication, but also look for the best practices and explained free consultancy in your own organization, but also learn from the successes and failures, but do the same for the industry and the global level. Be patient, try to accept making small steps, look for the low-hanging fruit, trust yourself, your team, and the business friends, learn, but also allow mistakes, and keep communicating. And more advice, support needed in this challenge, just call me.
Terrific. Thank you, Olaf. Michael, why don't you go next and give us your insight into what you see as the corporate strategies, how they've changed, and also what you see the next 12 to 24 months being the primary spend strategies that your clients are anticipating and looking to leverage.
Well, we see a couple of strategies. One is there's a large scale movement to use fewer law firms. In large companies, you'll find, there's often hundreds of law firms on the books, but I'm going to say about our research shows that around 25 are getting the bulk of the work, and of that, about 8 are really getting the bulk of that work. Then you've got, so you kind of got this 8, 15, and then hundreds. And what we're finding is there's a big movement to kind of shrink that 8 and 15 group, because that's where corporate counsel really spend a lot of their time. Every law firm they hire, they have to sit down, they have to debrief, they have to explain, and the less they have to do that, the more time they save. Second, it's also a kind of a camouflage risk management tool, because the fewer organizations you have doing your work, the higher the probability they'll all be working towards the same cause. They'll all have the same understanding, and they'll all understand whatever risk level your particular company, your organization is comfortable with, what I call the risk culture. As we find a lot of confusion about that when you have a lot of law firms. And I guess we're expecting spending overall to be, maybe on the year be up 1 to 2%, but low single digits. And of that, there's this massive movement towards anything related to the workforce. That's where the biggest growth is going to be. We're expecting double-digit growth in workforce-related issues, as we are in class actions and as we are in cyber. So those three areas are going to take up a much bigger part of the budget, and other things are going to be cut. So it's not when we say that it's going to be increased spending, and other folks have said, spending is holding up. I think it's a little bit uneven. There's places where spending is increasing. There's spending where, frankly, you don't have to spend. Or you can defer it. You can, there's very little risk in going out and maybe using a less expensive law firm. So there's a lot of movement in that area. So, it's kind of allocating the budget to where it needs to be. It's the reduction of law firms is another big strategy. And then the last one is corporate counsel tell us that they're trying to bring work in-house. Our research shows that they added roughly 3 in-house lawyers last year. So you folks can probably comment better than I can whether or not 3 attorneys in-house will handle a 27% increase in caseload. Sounds a bit ambitious to me, but I'm not an attorney and I'm not in-house. But those are the 3 kind of trends / strategies that we hear the most about. And as a side note, what we're hearing is, for some reason, this is really stoking the interest in technology. People say they're not going to do anything just yet because their hands are just so tied with everything that's going on day to day. But all of a sudden, they see the need to embrace technology and use it more, probably because everybody's remote. But so I'd be interested in what other folks are hearing as compared to that.
Perfect. Thank you, Michael. Stephanie, you're up next.
Yeah, it's there's everything that you guys are saying is consistent with what I'm seeing with my clients and as I talk to people in my network. So it's kind of nice to get that validation. Mike made an earlier point that we're watching legal department budgets get tightened, shrunken down. I think it depends on what's happening with their overall companies too, obviously, right? If they're in an industry, and travel and entertainment that got hit really hard, then obviously legal, their budgets are really getting tightened. And so, and the opposite is true when it seems like, the business has benefited from this time. It seems like the legal department, the budget, they're not, it's either they're not getting extra money, let's put it that way, but their budgets certainly haven't gotten slashed and burned. So that's what I'm seeing internally from a budget perspective. And like Mike made the earlier comment about how law firm fees, are increasing, whatever, 2 to 5%, whatever you're seeing, it's untenable, right? I mean, as budgets are shrinking, they can't also keep paying for additional outside counsel fees. So what we're seeing on the internal, on that work being done internally, it's consistent with what everybody here on the panel has said. It seems like GCs are looking at the work that's being done in the department. And rather than, the model 15 years ago was in-house people did the work the in-house attorneys really focused on seemed to be the more, I hate to use this word, but it was the more mundane routine work, right? And then it was the very high value work that was getting outsourced to outside counsel. And that model has totally changed. So now what we see is more and more work is being pulled inside. You're seeing the routine work getting outsourced to alternative service providers. You see the work that GCs want to keep in-house, that's what they're viewing as this core competency. You're seeing that getting pulled in. So you have a lot more interesting, I'm projecting what would be interesting to lawyers in-house, doing that work inside. And then you're still always going to have that, you know, some work being outsourced to, a lot of work, maybe even 50% of work being outsourced to outside counsel. But I think the mix has changed. And so it's the work that they don't want to think is a core competency. They don't think it's going to be constantly repetitive. They don't want to hire people internally to do that. That's the work that's getting sent out to outside counsel. So, so you're seeing more outsourcing, I think, on that lower end work, if you will. And then the internal attorneys have been moved higher up the value chain. And so to Mike's point about whether or not 3 attorneys is enough to handle that increase in work, I don't know. I mean, of course, it does vary company to company, but I think through hiring a couple more in-house people, outsourcing at the right levels, and through automation, and also, like I said earlier, cutting out the work you don't need to be doing, whether that's saying, no, we're not doing this anymore, putting in thresholds, getting templates out there, getting self-help tools out there to clients, and training your clients to do a lot of this work themselves that you really don't need attorneys to be doing. That's kind of the magic secret sauce, right? So if you've got the right people doing the right things, meaning the right people outside of legal doing the right things too, as well as that mix of, you know, outsourcing and automation, I think that's where you're seeing legal departments able to handle. It's not just the throwing the bodies at the work, but it's, you know, through this combination of automation, process improvement, self-help, that you're also seeing the legal departments they're able to, survive. And also just one other interesting point too, because I started in law a long time ago I'm not a lawyer, and so I kind of observed this from the outside. You saw that people would leave law firms to move in-house for that lifestyle change, right? Like it was a huge lifestyle change. And I think that like has kind of, I think that the lifestyle between the law firm and in-house is not as vast as it used to be. So in-house people, I think, are working harder. They're feeling the pressure. They're working longer hours. And so I just wanted to throw that in there because it seems, I'd be curious to see if the other lawyers feel the same way, but I think we've seen a little bit of convergence between the lifestyle of the law firms and the in-house teams, because everybody I'm working with anyway is working their tushes off for sure. So anyway, that's kind of, I hope that answers the question on the mix and the budget. We're seeing, for the most part, budgets are staying about the same. And then on some ends, you're seeing the budget shrinking. On some ends, you're seeing the budget kind of increasing a little bit.
Thank you, Stephanie. Akshay, you have been more than patient for your turn to speak on the second question, but I'm also going to allow you to lead us off on the third question as well. And that is how we close out, how do we see the procurement's role expanding in the future, given these changes in attitudes and initiatives? And what final advice would you have for this group? So if you'll speak to kind of what your view is on how things have changed and what your initiatives are going into 2021. Confirm Stephanie's position that everybody in the corporate world is wearing multiple hats and putting in more hours than they expected to. And then finally, just give some recommendations on and final advice from the procurement role standpoint on how they should what they should be focused on going into 2021.
Sure. I'll echo everything everyone said, by the way. I think these are great insights. I think one big kind of overarching takeaway from those is that you can't just look at external resourcing to solve your cost problems. I think that you have to realize how closely tied the internal world, to Steph's points around org structure, work segmentation internally, how closely tied that is to the money that's going out. If you're grossly under-resourced in one area, there are very few escape valves that legal departments have to get the work done. And we're one of those, we're one of those pillars within a company that doesn't really have a choice on the work that it does. If we get a lawsuit, we can't exactly tell the judge or the other side, hey, yeah, we're not going to handle this, right? Business units, revenue generating functions have choices that they can make around business decisions, whether they're going to go into a market or go into a product. We don't have that choice. So it's really important to understand how closely tied both the internal work, how it's delivered, who's doing it, is to the external work, which is about spend, right? That's where your money goes. And the better that you understand that, and that's a journey that we're engaging in right now, is getting a better handle on who's doing what internally at Facebook. Are we aligned the way that we should be? What's the right answer for us as a company? To Olaf's point earlier, it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. And I think you really have to dig into what your priorities are, what your risk profile is as a company and as a legal department to understand what that segmentation should look like. On the technology piece, I couldn't agree more. It should be the last portion of a particular solution. You got to get through all the other people and process parts first before you get to technology, because it's a tool that accelerates, and acceleration can go up or it can go down if you don't have the right process in place. In terms of, procurement's role, our world at Facebook with respect to external resourcing for the legal department is run through my team. It's not run through procurement. That being said, in the last 3 or 4 months, I have developed a relationship with our procurement department. And it's been really interesting to see how they do things, what they look at. The one danger that I've seen some of my colleagues and peers in legal departments fall into is if they bring procurement in and procurement's exercise is to just slash rates and get to the bottom dollar with respect to finding you the outside resource. That's not the right way to do procurement. And especially for legal services, because you can actually end up creating more risk for the company if you haven't selected the appropriate partner for the work. I do think there's a very strong partnership to be made, because there's a lot of data that procurement has that if you're in legal ops, you may not have, that can be incredibly beneficial to a particular end. So, advising on kind of developing that relationship where it makes sense, I think could be really important.
Excellent. Thank you, Akshay. Olaf, do you want to give a final advice to the procurement folks on the phone and how you're seeing that their role is expanding, and any final advice for them around spend management?
Yeah, great link to Stephanie's remark. I will use this in the end about change management, of course, and also from Akshay telling about procurement and just talking about rebates and those kind of things, because that is prehistorically procurement as it should be in the past and not in a modern organization. So procurement's role is already changing dramatically due to the COVID-19 impact, but also changing soon due to the important work also from the lobby, from Sylvia, but also the buying legal counsel work, and of course the experts on this great panel. This journey to world-class level can't be successful or even be reached by procurement department on their own. It requires a couple of things: teamwork, acceptance, understanding, and respecting each other. It's about culture, a way of thinking, those kind of things. Often, that's true, a burning platform is needed to trigger this and catalyze this change in the organization to move this forward. This always works quite well. The question is, and this is also important, can you do this journey and change with the same people, not only procurement, but also in the legal department? Because, and this doesn't apply, as I mentioned already, only to the procurement department, but all related processes and linked departments. Why? Because this new way of working and thinking might demand another higher developed skill set of people compared to the old way of working and thinking. And there are examples where this change in employees' people runs up to more than 50% of the incumbent people and functions, and being able to have the right skill set available to execute the new way of thinking and working. Is this difficult in the beginning? Yes, sure. And quite often people in these functions working for more than 10, 20, 25 years. But following this as a change project with the right human sensitive change approach, in narrow contact with board, HR and works council, you will be able to create only winners, that's for sure. So closing my part, and also advice from my side, the Dutch guy in Germany and Europe, real procurement is a team effort and should be on the agenda of every company at each level. In times of crisis, it's about cost management, surviving, continuity, and already thinking about opportunities for the future. In huge growth, the nice situation, it's about managing the growth, availability, risk management, innovation, digitalizations, the free consultancy in and outside your company, and in the end, a change management program, creating real value and increasing your competitive advantage. Real cost savings and sustainable savings, as Stephanie already mentioned, is change management. Just do it. and find your friends and work together and trust each other. So simple. Why is it so difficult? I will stop now, Mark.
Thank you, Olaf. I appreciate it. Stephanie, I'll let you go next, and then we'll let Michael close out the hour with his final thoughts on the procurement's role and how that's expanding into the future, and any final advice.
Great. I think from my part, I've always had a very lucky time with our procurement teams at HP and Flex. We had absolutely the best procurement partners. So somebody posted in the chat, you're right, procurement doesn't always pick the lowest bidder. From my experience, I think what Akshay, I'm sorry to speak for you, Akshay, but I think what he was saying is when it goes bad, it's because they were focusing on the lowest bidder. And, you know, unfortunately, there are procurement people who do focus on that. And that's why I think general counsels have always kept them at, you know, arm's length. And so our goal is to show that, you know, once procurement, if you get a great procurement partner, there's nobody more valuable on your team. They run the processes for you. They have expertise that you don't have. Even from a legal ops perspective, we've got a little bit of procurement expertise, but that's not usually our specialty. And so leveraging these people and their expertise is critical, and it can save you a ton of time, and it could get you a significantly better result. So I'm a huge fan of it. I would work on building that relationship first. That's what I did both at HP and at Flex, and worked really hard to build those good relationships with procurement. And then when I could see that my partner was super bright and credible, then we were, you know, able to talk to the legal team and win them over. It was, speaking of change management, it was a bit of a process. So just my 2 cents, it's definitely worth leveraging that relationship. It's when I've had the greatest successes saving money for the company. It's been in partnership with procurement.
Excellent. Michael, we'll let you have the final thoughts on this topic. And Sylvia, yes, if you'll put the polls up as Michael is giving his advice, final words of advice, that'll be terrific.
Well, I think it's interesting because procurement and the use of procurement is much like you know, going into a market. There are companies with great procurement departments who come in and look at all the factors. And we've heard of procurement departments that come in and interview everybody in the legal department. What are you looking for? What do you want? What makes a good law firm? What makes a bad law firm? What do you avoid? You know, so to really get a good understanding. And then there's other procurement departments that just come in and say, you know, basically we're putting out, you know, an RFP, and, you know, unfortunately they do go on low rates. And so you've kind of got, you know, a whole spectrum. We find the ones that spend the time, and this takes as much effort on the legal department as it does procurement, to take the time and say, this is what we're looking for, this is what we need. To tell the procurement department, we worked with firm X and firm Y before, and we either loved them or hated them, and here's why, so you should know that. But, you know, one of the things we're hearing more and more about is in places where there isn't a super tight relationship, the legal departments are kind of vetting the law firms, and then when it gets to things like rates, they're turning it over to procurement. And they're saying, okay, we kind of got the chemistry down. We know who we want to work with. You guys, you know, can you guys button up the rest for us? And that has been, in some cases, the procurement people are not very happy, frankly, because they're like, why didn't you get us involved earlier? But most are kind of like, well, that's great. How can we get involved earlier next time? How can we, you know, that's kind of their door. And then what we see on the law firm side is the minute procurement shows up, all of a sudden, one of their pricing officers shows up. And one of the unintended or intended impacts is the corporate counsel and the partners in the firm kind of smile a little bit because they don't have to go through the rate negotiation dance. They let other people who don't have as much emotion in it handle it. So I think, you know, our experience is that the more procurement can do two things. One, really understand what the hot buttons are for the legal department. And then secondly, you know, one of the big benefits that got a couple corporate counsel attentions from what we heard is that, wait a minute, these guys can save me a lot of time. Not only can they save me money, but I'm up to my so high past my eyeballs in work right now. And if you guys can help me come in and manage this, and I've end up with good and better law firms, then that's a win-win. And it sometimes isn't even about the savings. So it's kind of that, benefit approach of where do the benefits come from. And one of the things I've learned from corporate counsel and others are welcome to comment is, if you go in and say, I can save you $1,000, or you go in and say, I can save you 3 days of time, boy, you're going to get the 3 days of time any day of the week. So, it's the benefit. It's like, anything in sales, if you will. Listen, what do they want? And then the more you can create dialogue, the more success you're going to have with legal and procurement.